In China, there is a saying that an impossible trinity exists between liking the Soviet Union, being a Chinese, and understands history. And this is why China had a mixed feeling about the fall of the Soviet Union. A very good example is the Soviet policy towards China between 1938 and 1941. In 1938, as Britain and France were beginning to accommodate Nazi Germany and trying to push Hitler eastward against the Soviet Union, a process that eventually culminated in the Munich Agreement, the Soviet Union told the Comintern that the principal contradiction was no longer between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, but between the democratic bourgeoisie and the fascist bourgeoisie. That shift in line contributed to the Soviet intervention in the CCP, ordering Mao not to eliminate Chiang Kai-shek after the Xi'an incident, and the Soviet Union supported the formation of the Second United Front between the CCP and the KMT. However, 1 year later in 1939, after the Soviet Union signed the Non-Aggression Pact with Nazi Germany, the narrative changed immediately. Even as Japan was continuing to invade China and was on the verge of overrunning vast parts of Chinese territory, and as Germany conquered Poland and rest of the Western Europe, the Soviet Union told the Comintern and the CCP the principal contradiction had once again become between the bourgeoisie and the commentariat. In that framework, the war between Nazi Germany and Britain and France was no longer treated as a struggle against fascism, but as an imperialist war, fundamentally no different from the First World War. The same applies between the Chiang Kai-shek and the Japanese Empire. In that sense, China was betrayed. Then in 1941, when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union, the story changed for a third time. Now the Soviet Union needed to secure its eastern flank, so it wanted stability with Japan. Under those conditions, the CCP was instructed to fight in northern China in a way that could constrain the Japanese expansion in the Far East, because Moscow wanted rooms to negotiate neutrality with Tokyo. So from the Chinese point of view, the fact that the Soviet Union changed its ideological principles for 3 times in 4 years shows that the USSR is not acting according to any universalist communist commitments, but according to the Soviet national interests. And this is why, from China's perspective, the relation with America and the Soviet Union is just a remixed continuation of the older conflict between America and the Russian Empire in China. Washington emphasized the open door policy and access to trade, while Moscow emphasized the spheres of influence and buffer zone. And this is why, even in 1948, the Soviet Union concluded a friendship treaty with the nationalists and believed that a divided China between the nationalists and the communists was actually the most favorable outcome for the Soviet interests. And this same pattern can be also seen elsewhere in the Soviet foreign policy, whether it's the Balkans after the percentage agreement with Churchill, in Iran, and in countries such as Poland, Yugoslavia, Egypt, and Afghanistan. So even if you can argue that the collapse of the Soviet Union destroyed bipolarity and opened the door for American unipolar hegemony, which eventually contributed to America's long-term decay, I would still say the fall of the Soviet Union was both inevitable and well-deserved.